They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I learned it's even better when served with surgical precision. My name is Carmen, and at 68 years old, living in Houston, Texas, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. The fluorescent lights in the hospital room buzzed like angry wasps as I lay there, tubes snaking from my arms like transparent vines. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, they said. 6 months if I was lucky. The irony wasn't lost on me. After spending 43 years as a nurse healing others, my own body had turned traitor. But it wasn't the cancer that nearly killed me that October morning. It was what my daughter-in-law Aria said when she thought I was unconscious. If this story resonated with your soul, click subscribe and let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. I'm truly curious to know where you're tuning in from. Let me take you back 18 months earlier when my son David first brought Aria home. She was 26, stunning in that effortless way that made makeup seem redundant, with honey-coloured hair that caught light like spun gold. David was 32 and absolutely besotted. "Mum, she's incredible," he'd whispered to me in the kitchen while she charmed his father in the living room. "She's getting her master's in business. She speaks 3 languages and she volunteers at the animal shelter." I smiled and squeezed his hand, genuinely happy for him. After his divorce 3 years prior, seeing that spark return to his eyes felt like watching winter finally surrender to spring. But there were small things. The way Aria's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. How she'd subtly redirect conversations when I shared stories about David's childhood. The barely perceptible eye roll when I offered to help with wedding planning. "She's just nervous," David would say whenever I gently mentioned these observations. "She wants you to like her so badly." So I tried harder. I opened my home, my heart, and eventually my checkbook. When David lost his job just 3 months before their wedding, I didn't hesitate. "I have savings," I told them over dinner at my dining room table, the same table where I'd fed David countless meals as a boy. "Let me help with the wedding costs." Aria's face lit up then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "Carmen, that's so generous, are you sure?" $43,000, that's what I contributed to their fairy tale wedding. The dress alone cost more than my car, but seeing David happy made every penny worth it. Or so I thought. After the wedding, they moved into the apartment I helped them secure with a co-signature in the Heights area of Houston. When David struggled to find work in his field, I quietly slipped Aria grocery money. When her car broke down, I covered the repairs. When they wanted to take a honeymoon they couldn't afford, I made it happen. "You're too generous, Mom," David would say, but he never refused. Aria had stopped even pretending gratitude by then. The please and thank yous disappeared. The updates about their lives became scarce. Family dinners shifted from weekly to monthly to whenever they needed something. But I told myself this was normal. Young couples needed space. They were building their life together. I was just the mother-in-law after all. The cancer diagnosis came on a Tuesday. I'd been feeling tired for months, attributing it to long shifts at Houston Methodist Hospital. But when the fatigue became overwhelming and the weight started falling off despite my normal appetite, I finally listened to my colleague Sarah's nagging and got tested. "I'm sorry, Carmen," Dr. Martinez said, his kind eyes heavy with the burden of bad news. "It's aggressive, but we can try." "How long?" I interrupted. "With treatment, maybe 12 to 18 months without—" He trailed off. I called David immediately. He cried. My strong, stoic son broke down completely. Aria took the phone. "We'll be right there," she said, her voice steady and controlled. They came that evening, David red-eyed and shaky, Aria composed and beautiful as always. We talked about treatment options, about my will, about practical matters that felt surreal to discuss. "Mum, you should move in with us," David said suddenly. "You shouldn't be alone during this." I started to protest, but Aria surprised me. "David's right. We have the extra room, and I can help with appointments and medications. I've been thinking about leaving my job anyway to focus on starting our family." For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this crisis would bring us closer. Maybe I'd finally have the relationship with my daughter-in-law that I'd always wanted. The first month living with them was almost pleasant. Aria drove me to chemo appointments, held my hand during the worst moments, and kept detailed notes about my medications. David worked from home more often, and we fell into a comfortable routine. But as my condition worsened and I became more dependent, things began to shift. "Carmen, could you try to keep it down at night?" Aria asked one morning, after a particularly bad evening of nausea. "David has that big presentation today." "Of course," I said, shame burning in my chest. I hadn't realized my retching was so loud. The requests multiplied. Could I eat in my room instead of the kitchen? The smell was bothering Aria's morning sickness. She was 3 months pregnant now, a joy that felt complicated by my situation. Could I limit my shower time? They were trying to conserve water. Could I ask my friends not to visit so often? It was disruptive. I complied with everything, shrinking myself smaller and smaller to accommodate their lives. The breaking point came during my 5th month with them. I'd had a terrible reaction to a new chemo drug and spent 2 days in the hospital. When I came home weak and barely able to walk, I found boxes in my room. "What's this?" I asked Aria, who was folding my clothes with mechanical efficiency. "We need to move you to the basement room," she said without looking up. "The baby will need this space for a nursery." The basement room was cramped, with one tiny window and the perpetual smell of dampness. But I nodded and helped pack my belongings, telling myself it was temporary, just until I got better. Or until I didn't. David was travelling for work more frequently now. Aria said they needed the money for baby preparations. I understood, but it meant I was alone with her most days in that sweltering Houston heat, watching her transform our home to erase any trace of my presence. My favourite chair disappeared. "It clashed with the new couch," she explained. The family photos on the mantel were replaced with sleek modern art. "I'm redecorating for better energy flow." Even my contributions to groceries stopped being acknowledged. When I tried to add items to the shopping list, Aria would sigh dramatically. "Carmen, we're on a strict budget now. We need to prioritise healthy foods for the baby." But it was the whispered phone conversations that truly broke my spirit. Late at night, I'd hear Aria talking to someone, her mother, I assumed, through the thin basement walls. "I know, but what choice do I have? David insists we keep her here." "No, the money's basically gone. She spent everything on the wedding and helping David when he was unemployed." "I'm trying to be patient, but honestly, how much longer can this go on?" I'd love to know if you've ever experienced something similar. Share your story in the comments below. By month 6, I was bedridden most days. The cancer had progressed faster than anyone expected, and the chemo had been suspended because my body couldn't handle it anymore. David had hired a part-time nurse, but Aria had convinced him it was too expensive. "I can handle her basic needs," she'd argued. "We need to save money for the baby." So it was just Aria and me most days, her resentment thick as humidity in the basement air. That October morning started like any other. I'd been having trouble sleeping and was drifting in and out of consciousness when I heard footsteps on the basement stairs. Aria appeared with my morning medications and a glass of water. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, her voice carrying the practiced cheerfulness of someone going through motions. "Tired," I whispered, which was true. I was tired of everything. The pain, the treatments, the feeling of being a burden. She sat on the edge of my bed, and for a moment her mask slipped. "Carmen, I need to talk to you about something." I tried to focus on her face, but the morphine made everything soft around the edges. "David's been offered a position in Seattle. It's a huge opportunity for us, especially with the baby coming." She paused, studying my face. "We're thinking of taking it." "What about me?" I managed to ask. Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Well, that's what we need to discuss. David's worried about moving you in your condition, but honestly, Carmen, we need to think about our family." The way she said, "our family," like I wasn't part of it, had never been part of it, sent a chill through me despite the fever. There are excellent facilities in town, she continued. Places where you'd get proper care. Professional care. You mean nursing homes, I said. Specialised care facilities, she corrected, as if the euphemism made it less cruel. I closed my eyes, pretending to drift off, but I was listening to every word as she continued. Look, I've been patient. I've put my life on hold for months, playing nurse to someone who should have made better financial decisions. You spent your entire savings on our wedding and bailing David out, and now we're supposed to sacrifice our future for you. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. David doesn't see it that way, obviously. He's blinded by guilt and some misplaced sense of obligation, but I have to think about my child, about what kind of life we can give them. We can't do that with a dying woman consuming all our resources and energy. She stood up, smoothing her dress. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell David that you want to move to assisted care, that you think it's best for everyone. Because if you don't, I'll make sure that whatever time you have left is absolutely miserable. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that I felt rather than heard. I'll make your life hell, Carmen. I'll tell David you're becoming combative, that you're not taking your medications properly, that you're a danger to the baby. I'll make him choose between his dying mother and his pregnant wife. And we both know who he'll choose. She straightened up, her mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Think about it, she said sweetly, loud enough that any recording device would catch her caring tone. I just want what's best for everyone. After she left, I lay there staring at the water-stained ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not pain, not despair, but rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned away the fog of medication and self-pity. She thought I was helpless. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was already dead. She was wrong on all counts. I spent the next week planning using the clarity that comes with having nothing left to lose. The first thing I did was call my lawyer Susan, who had handled my estate planning. Carmen, how are you holding up? She asked when she heard my voice. I need to make some changes to my will, I said. And I need you to come here to do it. Can you manage that? Of course. Is everything all right? Everything's about to be. Susan arrived the next afternoon while Aria was at a doctor's appointment. David was at work and I'd told him I had a routine visit from my oncologist. Not exactly a lie. Susan's visit was certainly diagnostic. What changes do we need to make? Susan asked, pulling out her laptop. I told her everything. Every detail of the conversation with Aria, every example of manipulation and cruelty, every dollar I'd spent supporting them. Susan's expression grew darker with each revelation. Carmen, this is financial abuse, she said finally. And what she threatened, that's elder abuse. We could... No, I interrupted. I don't want a legal battle. I want something more elegant. I outlined my plan, watching Susan's eyebrows climb higher with each detail. Are you absolutely certain about this? She asked when I finished. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The new will was executed and witnessed that afternoon, but that was just the beginning. My next call was to my former colleague, Miguel, who worked in the hospital's financial aid department. Miguel, I need a favour, I said when he answered. I need you to check on something for me. Anything, Carmen. You know that. I gave him Aria's full name and asked him to look up any applications for financial assistance or charity care at our hospital system. What he found made my blood boil all over again. She applied for and received full financial assistance for all her prenatal care, Miguel reported. Listed her household income as just David's unemployment benefits from last year. Made no mention of spousal support or family assistance. So she committed fraud. Technically, yes. She failed to report significant household support, which would have disqualified her for the program. Can you document that for me? Already printing it out. My third call was to my bank. Despite Aria's assumption, I hadn't spent all my savings on their wedding and David's unemployment. I'd moved the bulk of my assets to a separate account when I got my diagnosis, something I'd learned to do after watching too many families torn apart by medical bankruptcies during my years working in Texas hospitals. "Mrs. Rodriguez, how can we help you today?" my personal banker James asked. "I need to set up some transfers," I said, "and I need it done very carefully." Over the next few days, I made several more calls. To my insurance company, to David's employer, to the real estate agent who'd helped them find their apartment. Each conversation added another piece to my puzzle. The picture that emerged was damning. Aria had been systematically lying to everyone, claiming poverty while living off my generosity, applying for aid she didn't qualify for, even telling David's employer that they were caring for his terminally ill mother at great personal sacrifice to justify his frequent absences and requests for advancement. She'd turned my cancer into her career opportunity. But the most shocking discovery came from my private investigator. Yes, I hired one. When you're dying, you get very serious about making sure the truth comes out. Aria wasn't just married to David, she was still legally married to someone else. Her first marriage to a man named Marcus in Nevada had never been legally dissolved. The divorce she'd shown David was fraudulent, a document she'd created herself with surprising skill, which meant her marriage to my son was invalid, which meant she had no legal claim to his property, his insurance, or anything else she'd been so carefully positioning herself to inherit. By the time I was ready to act, I felt stronger than I had in months. The morphine was still there, the pain was still there, but underneath it all was a steel core of purpose that made everything else manageable. The confrontation came on a Thursday afternoon. David was in Seattle for his final interview, and Aria thought she was alone with a helpless, dying woman. She came down to the basement around noon with my lunch, a sad sandwich and lukewarm soup that barely qualified as food. "David called," she said, setting the tray down with unnecessary force. "He got the job. We'll be moving in 6 weeks." She waited for me to react, to beg or cry or argue. Instead, I smiled. "That's wonderful news," I said calmly. "You must be so excited to start your new life." She blinked, clearly thrown by my response. "I've been thinking about what you said," I continued, "about assisted care. You're absolutely right. It would be better for everyone." You agree?" "Completely. In fact, I've already made some arrangements." Her relief was palpable, and for the first time in months, her smile looked genuine. "Carmen, I'm so glad you understand. I was worried you'd make this difficult." "Oh, I wouldn't dream of making things difficult," I said, reaching for the envelope Susan had left with me. "I just need you to sign a few papers to make it official." "What kind of papers?" "Just acknowledgement that you support this decision. For David's peace of mind, you understand." She barely glanced at the documents before signing them with flourish. "This is going to be so much better for everyone," she said. I couldn't agree more. After she left, I waited exactly 1 hour before making my first phone call. "David, sweetheart, I need you to come home immediately," I said when he answered. "There's something I need to tell you about Aria." "Mum, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but we need to talk. Just you and me before she gets back from her doctor's appointment." He was on the next flight home. When David arrived that evening, I was sitting in the living room, not the basement, the living room. I'd managed to climb the stairs for the first time in weeks, fueled by sheer determination. "Mum, what are you doing up here? Should you be—" "Sit down, David," I said. "We need to talk." I started with the documents Aria had signed, spreading them across the coffee table. "What are these?" he asked. "Read them." His face went white as he scanned the papers. They weren't what Aria thought they were. Instead of supporting my move to assisted care, she'd signed sworn statements acknowledging her threats, her fraud, and her intention to abandon me. "I don't understand," David said. "Why would she sign these?" "Because she didn't read them. She was so eager to get rid of me that she signed whatever I put in front of her." Then I showed him everything else, the financial records proving her fraud, the documentation of her bigamous marriage, the witness statements from my private investigator. "This can't be right," David whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." When Arya returned from her appointment 2 hours later, she found David and me sitting together in the living room, surrounded by evidence of her deception. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between us with growing alarm. "We know," David said simply. Her face cycled through several expressions: confusion, fear, anger, and finally, defiance. "Know what?" she asked, but her voice was already changing, becoming harder. "About Marcus," I said, "about the fraud. About everything." The mask finally came off completely. "You vindictive old bitch," she snarled, her beautiful face twisting into something ugly. "You couldn't just die quietly, could you?" "Arya!" David stood up, shocked. "Oh, don't act surprised, David. You knew she never liked me. You knew she was trying to control our relationship from the beginning." "She was helping us," David said. "She gave us everything." "She gave us nothing," Arya screamed. "She bought us. She bought our gratitude and our time and our freedom, and then she expected us to be her servants until she finally had the courtesy to die." The words hung in the air like poison gas. David stared at his wife, his not wife, Azika, with an expression I'd never seen before. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this house. Now." "David, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You married me while you were already married to someone else. You defrauded the hospital system. You threatened and abused my dying mother. Get out!" She looked between us one more time, and I saw the exact moment she realized her game was over. "Fine," she said, her voice pure venom. "But don't think this is over. I'll take you for everything you have. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are." "Actually," I said, standing up with more strength than I'd felt in months. "You won't." I handed her another envelope. "What's this?" "Your choices," I said. "You can leave quietly, annul your fraudulent marriage, and disappear from our lives forever. Or you can fight, and I'll make sure the district attorney gets copies of everything we discussed today." She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were copies of all the evidence, along with a letter from my attorney outlining the criminal charges she could face for bigamy, fraud, and elder abuse. "You can't prove any of this," she said, but her voice wavered. "I can prove all of it," I replied. "The question is whether you want to face it publicly or privately." She stared at the papers for a long moment, then looked up at David one last time. "I loved you," she said. "No," he replied. "You loved what I could give you. There's a difference." She left that night, taking only her personal belongings. Within a week, she'd filed papers in Nevada to annul her marriage to David, citing fraud. Her own fraud, ironically. By the end of the month, she was gone completely, leaving no forwarding address. The aftermath was complicated. David struggled with guilt and betrayal, questioning every moment of their relationship. I did my best to help him heal while dealing with my own recovery. Because here's the thing nobody expected, least of all me. I got better. Not completely. The cancer is still there, and always will be. But the combination of removing Arya's stress from my life, moving back upstairs to proper living conditions, and having something to fight for again gave me strength I thought was gone forever. My oncologist calls it remarkable. I call it revenge. David and I are closer now than we've been since he was a child. He never moved to Seattle. He said he wouldn't leave me again, not after what happened. Instead, he found a better job with a medical technology company right here in Houston and moved back into his childhood bedroom while he saves for a house. "I'm sorry, Mum," he tells me sometimes. "I should have seen what she was doing." "You saw what you needed to see," I always reply. "You're not responsible for someone else's cruelty." 6 months later, we learned that Arya had tried the same scheme with another family in Dallas, a wealthy widow with adult children. But her new targets did their research, found the trail of evidence I'd carefully documented, and she was arrested for fraud. She's serving 18 months in minimum security, which seems fitting somehow. Not too harsh, but enough to make the point. As for me, I'm still here, still fighting, still living in my son's house, our house now. The basement room has been converted into David's home office, and I've reclaimed my chair, my photos, and my place at the dinner table. The doctors say I might have years instead of months now. Maybe the anger really did cure something. Or maybe removing the stress of Arya's presence just let my body focus on healing instead of surviving. Either way, I learned something important in those dark months. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your ending. Arya thought she could manipulate a dying woman into disappearing quietly. Instead, she discovered that underestimating someone has consequences, and sometimes the person you think is weakest is actually the one with the most to fight for. I may be 68 years old with cancer, but I'm still here. I'm still David's mother. I'm still the woman who spent 43 years healing others and won't let anyone poison that legacy. And that, it turns out, is the most unthinkable thing of all: refusing to be erased. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the button now to join our community of women who refuse to be underestimated. You'll find stories like this one every day, stories that remind us all that sometimes the quietest response speaks the loudest. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.